Hey guys, today I want to talk to you about why your patience is actually an avoidant's greatest hope. Why it's actually something they desperately need to make it through the other side. And when I say make it through to the other side, I'm actually talking about them finding an emotional home because they're actually very emotionally lost. And I can say that with certainty because I was that avoidant. I was leaning dismissive avoidant. For those of you that are new here, by the way, I'm Gabriel. And so I want to explain how your patience, in a way, is that magnet to them that helps them actually find back to an emotional home or helps them even build one because they might not even have one to begin with. A caveat in this, of course, is how much patience is too much patience, and we'll definitely get into that later in the video. For now, let's talk about why, for an avoidant, your patience matters so much. And the primary reason is they haven't actually experienced it. I hadn't experienced much patience in my life. It was, in fact, a very high pressure environment where there were a lot of demands and expectations. And your avoidant may have had a similar upbringing, right? Whether that's in their family or educational or career environment, where there is just an immense amount of pressure to perform, to have instant results quickly, and there being no margin for error, no patience of any kind, where they have to be this top performer. So if you know them to have had an upbringing that echoed that, or spent a longer amount of time in an environment that was that way, that was demanding that from them, then know that to them that's a standard. It's their default. They don't expect patience. So when you are actually patient with them, it's a bit of a shock or a surprise, right? They might actually have this anticipation of waiting for the other shoe to drop because that's what they've had their whole lives. So when they spend time with you over the course of weeks, months, years even, and that doesn't happen or rarely happens, right? You're human too. They start to see you and themselves in a very different light. They experience the patience, the understanding, and the love rather than you have to perform now, you have to do this right now. And that's the first thing that slowly starts to soften their heart, to soften their walls, so that they start to trust you more and start to feel more at home with you. Which leads me to the next point, which is I really needed the patience, that environment of patience, to find myself. When you grow up in that aforementioned chaotic, high pressure environment, or family, there's simply no room for your true self, for who you are. So, somewhere along the way, I personally lost myself. I personally lost who I was and became a version of what was expected. I had adapted. And in the same way, your avoidant may have had to, or most likely did, have to adapt to whatever degree and fulfill certain roles and functions. And if they do that for long enough, of course, they're not really sure of who they are. They're just fulfilling the function. So your patience, in turn, is the thing that really helps them understand, hey, maybe this isn't quite who I am. So your patience is really the catalyst, the thing that helps them suddenly have room and an experience of exploring themselves, figuring out what they want, what they don't want, what they feel, rather than what they believe they should feel. And that kind of space allows for a level of self exploration that they probably didn't have before. And again, when you are providing that for them on a regular basis over a longer period of time, they start associating all of those positive experiences with you. And the reason this is so important is avoidants often have this tendency to be full of doubt about what they want, what they maybe should want. And when they're given this space, this environment to figure it out for themselves, it all goes from the imposed expectations that were set earlier in their lives to what do I actually want? And when you are part of that transition, that journey, it builds an immense amount of attachment to you because you are the one that facilitated that journey for them, that transition. And it can be a very scary one. And don't get me wrong, it's often chaotic. They will feel lost, they will second guess themselves. You often will also be on the chopping block because when they start putting their conditioning into question, their upbringing, everything kind of falls into question. It's like, what can I even trust anymore? Whom can I even trust anymore? And you will also be put under that level of scrutiny, deserved or no. But it's generally just a phase and it's a transition that they just need to go through. And once that happens, for me personally, for example, with my wife Carolina, the scrutiny ends and gratitude and attachment take its place. Because again, she was the one that really took me through that whole process. She supported me, she was patient and by my side as I was transitioning. So if things seem a little bleak right now with your avoidant, know that this isn't the end stage. It's sometimes just the transition, the part that they're kind of going through. And once they're out on the other side, you'll have somebody that's more openly attached and trusting towards you, rather than endlessly suspicious and needing space. Now, the next reason your patience is so important is that avoidants need to discover that they are lovable. They often have this deep-rooted belief that they are not, that somehow, again, they have to fulfill these expectations, these functions, these roles, so that they are then bestowed with love, right? That they have earned it. But when you are the person facilitating that patience, again, it kind of challenges this narrative of I must do X, Y, Z, fulfill these functions, and then I am lovable, because you're probably just really enjoying who they are. You're enjoying their company. You like spending time together. And sure, every relationship has pragmatics and logistics. It's not like it's all sunshine and rainbows, but your primary focus with them, I would presume, is to enjoy the company, right? To have a good time, to build a life together, which can be very contrary to what they had previously experienced. So when they have this, oh, like she's relating to me or he's relating to me, they just like me for who I am and love me for who I am, it's initially a very strange sensation. And they kind of need to work through that again. And there is this process of going from, I believe that love comes from me fulfilling these very specific functions and roles, to, oh, I'm just being loved because of who I am. And that seems a bit alien at first, and people don't understand why, and I didn't understand why. But once you get through the other side, you can expect your partner to be far more attached to you. You're the one that showed them, hey, I'm patient, I'm waiting here, and you're lovable, and I love you. And so what this all accumulates to, right? The initial patience, the space for them to figure out who they are, to realize that they are lovable, you providing that patience for them to go through those stages and that transition, results and accumulates in them finally finding an emotional home. And that emotional home is you. So they can become attached. They can overcome their avoidant tendencies. Day by day, week by week, it's not a light switch moment. But ultimately, you are the one waiting at the finish line that they want to embrace once they've crossed it and achieved that transition, succeeded in shedding some of that trauma, that perception of who they are that was just very distorted and inaccurate. Now, this is, of course, also describing the ideal scenario. I don't want to sugarcoat this because I know for some of you, there's a lot more tension and push-pull, and your avoidant is wanting space the whole time, and there just might be an overall more complicated picture. Which is why I also want to and need to talk about when you should stop being patient, right? There is a limit. You can't be infinitely giving. It's not healthy for you, it's not healthy for your relationship, and it's not going to work for them either. And the first and most obvious case is if you're being used. I've had clients that have this underlying fear that their avoidant is just using their patience to kind of get through their issues, work things through, and there's a suspicion or some kind of gut feeling that once they've finally crossed that finish line, they're not going to go and embrace them, they're going to go embrace somebody else, right? That they just take everything that they needed from you, everything that you were providing, all the patience and love and understanding, and then just jump ship. So if you have a suspicion that your avoidant partner has that tendency, has that potential, that you've seen other orange flags somewhere along the line that indicate that might be in their character, it's important to be careful here, right? You don't want to just don't fall into the trap of thinking that being endlessly patient and giving fixes everything. It does not. You most certainly also need to know when to draw a boundary, when to draw a line, so that you aren't being used, and also so that your avoidant understands to value what you are providing. It's a bit of a balance you need to find. Going to either extreme isn't healthy. You don't want to be overgiving, and you don't want to be abandoning or rejecting either, right? There's this middle ground. Now, another sign you want to be limiting your patience is if this has been going on for months or even years. I've seen cases where it may just be, let's say, 2 to a 4 month period where there's just a lot of maybe external pressure, a career, family, something that's just really making the relationship difficult right now. And an avoidant partner just needs a lot of patience, a lot of additional support. That's okay if that is just a temporary state, right? It's an emergency situation, if you will. But if that drags on and there's just this pattern of them doing push-pull, of going hot and cold, of being there and suddenly withdrawing, and if that goes on for not just months, but even years, that is too much. You are giving too much of your love and patience. That's where knowing your own worth and boundaries need to take the priority over the patience. So remember, if you feel like you're being used, that they're gonna jump ship, or if this is dragging out for months or years, or if it's a combination of the two, that's where the patience is not going to fix anything anymore, and you need to resort to other measures. You can find out more about how to handle that in our Attached and Avoidant program, which I'll link in the description. You can check it out there. Now, I've talked about this transition, right, from avoidant to a more wholesome, loving, attached person. And this transition from avoidant to secure is something my wife and I actually talked about in a lot of depth in one of our podcast episodes. We called it From Avoidant to Secure: How I Stopped Running from Love. So if you're curious to check that out, you can watch that right here. I'll link it.